I usually wait till actually who connects and then just closes me out. It's usually what
Okay, I think we're live, so good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday, happy March. Welcome to tonight's Board of Education workshop meeting. We'll call the meeting to order just around 7:05 and start with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Fantastic. What school is that from?
from Fox.
Fox Run, thank you. Fox Run. So tonight we have a great work session planned around school choice, looking at the themes, magnets, and different kinds of transportation impacts that they'll have in the coming year and years. To get us started, I'm going to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Alex Estrada.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at this workshop session. We have some really insightful information to share with the board as well as the public around our magnet and choice programs across the district. As the board may already know, and the public, we have great success in forming magnet programs across the district, some of which are CMS, as well as Tracy Elementary and Brookside is another Montessori model that we're trying to replicate across the district at large, but most importantly at our high schools. We have a number of pathways, for example, IB, marine science, that have existed for some time, and we're seeking to potentially further expanding those programs because it's important for us to have a K-12 continuum. So in today's presentation, we will have Ms. Fayos, Ms. Joanna Vanzetta, as well as Robert Pennington presenting on these different elements, as well as Brenda Wilcox-Williams will also talk about some of the work already in progress around the enrollment process and the lottery structures to support the magnet work that we're trying to do. Obviously, in order for us to achieve this, one of the things that we have to take into account is making sure that all students across the district have accessibility to the school through our transportation program. And with that, there are associated costs to make sure that that happens. In some cases, because of ridership, we won't be necessarily adding an additional cost, but would have the possibility of expanding programs across the district. I think that Ms. Vanzetta has done an incredible job at looking at the current resources at hand across the district and thinking very creatively in how we could utilize the resources we have to provide transportation across the different programs within the district. And in some areas, we need to further engage in conversation around how do we continue to support schools like Kendall Elementary to ensure that as they continue to expand their college readiness focus program and have because they have the magnet status, that program is offered across the district at large. Particularly as we move forward with our work to support the South Norwalk community and developing the South Norwalk school, there will be shifts in terms of enrollments across the organization that we have to take into consideration. And through that process, we want to also make sure that take into account all of the different pathways and programs so that our families have choice, but that choice comes with the support structures necessary for parents to have easy accessibility. I think coupled with that, the Family Center would be a hub of support for our families, particularly in building an understanding of complex system, right, that we are as a school system, and particularly not many families coming from across the world and from very different school systems that need support from us to most effectively understand the different avenues in which they can have access to these programs. And in the past, the way in which many of these pathways were filled or parents became aware was mainly by word of mouth or by knowing someone who was in the program that let them know about the program. That created a vacuum for other families that might not have a level of accessibility to the community to have access to those programs. So one of the things that we're seeking to do through this process is ensure that all families in the district understand the process, that all families have access to the different choices across the district at large. But most importantly, that we're thinking about this work in a K12 continuum, and that we make sure that programs that are offered, particularly at the high school level, also have developmental opportunities at the middle and elementary grades as well. So I'm going to ask Rob Pennington to come up, as well as Sandra and Joanna and Brenda in the order that they coordinated the presentation to present their different pieces today. I know they've orchestrated this piece to flow in accordance to the different processes that are in place to move this forward. So, Ms. Williams, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all in person tonight. So I'm going to start off a little bit, as the superintendent mentioned, just talking a little bit about the work that we've been doing on enrollment and registration this year before we go into a little bit more in-depth into some of the plans that are coming up for the future. We talked a little bit about this in the last meeting when we went through our goals and our half-year update for the year, so I'll try to hit some of the new points that we have here. First of all, we talked last time about grounding this in our strategic plan, and in particular in Goal 6, ensuring that families, as the superintendent mentioned, as part of her vision, ensuring that families are provided with equitable opportunities to access district resources and programs. We started that earlier in this year with our work on high school choice options and revamping our enrollment and our school choice lottery system, so that we were organizing a central lottery versus having the individual schools do their own separate lotteries with separate applications, separate criteria. This was launched in October after we spent quite a bit of time over the summer and in the early fall working with Jean Starkman, our school system guru on Ralph's team, to really take a deep dive and work with Power School to examine what would be required and going through all of the application processes that the schools had in place and putting together a central application that took away some of the elements that were perhaps barriers that had been in place before. There were no essays, for example, were taken out because even if it wasn't considered for the criteria to get into a program, just asking a student or a family to complete an essay could be a barrier. So we made sure that we had an even playing field across the board on our choice programs. We kicked this off with the High School Choice Fair, which had over 400 families in attendance. We put together the first high school programs catalog, which had consistent fact sheets for every choice program across our high schools. Marketed this quite a bit through both the district resources as well as through the schools. Our MLL Welcome Center was reaching out to families to make sure that they were aware and that they were attending, that were supporting the school in this effort. I'm happy to say that at this point, the lotteries have been selected. The schools are still following up with some of the people who were perhaps on the wait list and are accepting their offers and their positions based on the lottery. But basically, P-TECH is full with a waiting list at the moment. CGS is still walking through some of their acceptances since they are an interdistrict school and also have students from Bridgeport and some surrounding areas as well. But both of those schools will have wait lists. DMCA, the Digital Media and Communications Academy, was part of the offerings here. We have the Marine Science Academy, the McMahon Healthcare Academy as well. The virtual academy was something that was talked about as well in case there's a future need for that. So overall, I think the work was pretty successful here. We did have some learnings along the way. We did have CGS was a separate lottery this year because their application had already been submitted into the state as they are a state-funded school. So we were working on combining those two together, and next year those will be together in the same process and in the same system. And we're using the templates and the information that we gained from the high school programs to put together the next step with the elementary lotteries and registration, which we are about to launch as well. So the elementary lotteries and enrollment process will involve these schools, right? Concord Magnet School. Brookside, just the Montessori program, has a lottery for just the Brookside neighborhood area. Tracy Magnet School is a part of the lottery program. Silvermine Dual Language, and then for the first time this year will be Wolfpit Elementary. We're kicking this off with the elementary school choice fair, which we had originally hoped to hold in person in January, but unfortunately had to postpone due to COVID. We've now rescheduled this and have been actively promoting this for next Thursday, March 10th. In order to ensure that we've got some crowd control and some distancing, we are asking people to register for time slots. And so far, we've got nearly 100 people signed up for the time slots that are available. And we're still actively promoting this both through our district resources, but also working through our early childhood partners, since they're the ones who have direct contact with our pre-K families and helping us get the word out, as well as working through the City of Norwalk early childhood resources as well. The Elementary Choice Fair will have not only our own magnet and choice programs, but there will also be every school will be represented because it's an opportunity for all schools, even our neighborhood schools, to talk about what makes them different and what makes them special, and to connect with the families who are coming into the district perhaps for the first time. So they will all have booths or tables there with people there to represent the school. In addition, we will have community partner presence with After the Bell, for example. The family navigators from the City of Norwalk will be there to talk to our families. The health department, the Norwalk Community Health Center's mobile dental clinic will have a presence there. And the City of Norwalk Early Childhood and the mentor program as well. And we're still building out that list a little bit more. And then in addition to the schools, as I mentioned, we will have our district resources there like we did for the high school event in October, including our friends in transportation, health services, food services, the MLL Welcome Center will be present, and then specialized instruction and student services. We will have kiosks available to help people with the application process, both for registration and for the lotteries. And we do have interpreters available for anybody who needs them as well. And it's a little bit covered here on the screen, but we will be operating a shuttle bus throughout South Norwalk, making 3 stops at Rubner Court, the South Norwalk Community Center, and I believe the other one was Colonial Village, I think. I'm not sure, but I have to double check on that. But that will be rotating throughout the course of the night to bring people to the location, which will be Brookside Elementary. We needed a place that had a lot of space where you could spread out, but also was accessible and nearby to a lot of people. And then just like we had for the high school programs in the fall, we do have fact sheets available in multiple languages, as well as our choice program catalog, which will be available on the website as well, in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And then we're assisting the schools with other marketing options as well, so that they can continue to promote their programs. So with that as kind of a precursor and a little bit of a quick summary as to the work that's been going on this year, I'm going to turn it over to transportation, I think.
Good evening. Okay, sorry. I don't do this often. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about magnet and choice transportation. What we're currently doing at the elementary level is providing transportation for CMS, Silvermine Dual Language, and Tracy Character. Now, these are programs that have been in place for quite some time. CMS is currently ride-sharing 12 buses with our charter school. Silvermine is currently using 9 bus routes to transport throughout town. And then Tracy Character has just opened about 2 years ago. They became a magnet. And we're currently using 4 bus routes, but as their geographic service area is growing, we will start to see a transition there over time. These current bus route structure allows us to ride share the above programs with no additional cost. As time goes on, we'll be adding programs and transportation will be changing, but this is part of our future that we'll discuss shortly. At the high school level, we have the magnet programs for CGS and PTEC, and they are housed at their home district schools. We are able to utilize this service, and these 2 programs have basically paved the pathway, so to say, for the other pathway programs transportation. When CGS began years ago, we were able to slowly start to transition students and pick up routes and pick up students in different geographic areas of town. So we've built that over time and been able to now feed the IB program, the healthcare program, and the Marine Science Academy, and be able to use those buses and pick up those students. So it's been a great service that we've been able to provide, and this has been through the CGS program. Same was true for PTEC with the Digital Media Communications Academy. We are able to provide the transportation for those programs based on what we've already have scheduled for PTEC. Again, at no additional cost because of how we're ride sharing. So moving towards the future, we're going to continue to offer the elementary and high school level magnet programs and pathways and provide the transportation using current resources. In addition, we'll be moving forward with new programs for the elementary level and starting with next school year with the Wolfpit Integrated Arts Program, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago at a board meeting. We'll be able to utilize the bus service with Tracy. The availability of combining those routes will allow us to service both of the buildings with additional routes, and so it'll be a total of 7 buses, and with no significant impact on the students on their ride time. As the program expands, we'll be able to evaluate those needs and possibility of adding buses over time based on the geographic area, and being able to hopefully provide additional service using the middle school choice program buses as we move forward into the future. Tracy and Magnet and Wolfpit campuses are within a 2-mile radius of each other, and within its 15-minute difference. And so the arrival and departure times, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, allow us the opportunity to ride share those buildings. And it also gives the school leadership an opportunity to collaborate on transportation and possibility of future joint events to work together. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob to discuss more, and you'll see me again.
Good evening, members of the board. So we're going to talk a little bit about our K12 Pathways and middle school choice. And it's a good transition from Joanna to me and then back to Joanna, because as we're looking at middle school pathways and choice programs, that will have busing impacts as well.
I think before we go into that piece, I just want to make sure the board doesn't have any questions in terms of the component that Joanna presented so far on transportation.
I'm curious, when we talk about, no significant impact, if there's a particular threshold that we are looking at for, what kind of impact is significant?
Well, currently, there's no impact on what we're doing because we're ride sharing, because the tiering structure allows it.
Yeah.
No significant impact or a low significant impact moving forward with what we do will all depend on where the students are coming from. It's all geographics. So we will use the current resources and add students as needed. And if we have to add buses in the future, we would then make them available. We'll be repurposing vehicles over time. And so we'll be able, that would be the low impact, right? Would be because we're repurposing the vehicles that we already have in the fleet. Does that make sense?
And in some cases also, the buses are not at capacity. So in many of these riderships, the buses have in many cases been 50% full. So by creating the rider share, sharing buses allows us to really maximize the utilization of the buses in the different routes. Because some of the routes, particularly at the elementary school level, are not at capacity. Our middle school is a little different. The ridership in middle school is much higher.
And we'll cover that in the next presentation. Yeah.
And I appreciate the logistics of it. I was kind of thinking about whether we had a threshold of saying we don't want to add more than X number of minutes commute.
So based on our tiering structure, we really don't have the availability.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So our routes are average between 35 and 40 minutes, and we really have to stay within that time frame for them to work and arrive on time at the school. So we'll work within that time frame.
That's very helpful.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Joanna, is there,
Rob just has a really long presentation.
is there a cushion? I mean, it's possible that we have it where you need to add a lot of extra buses and still with actual budget, right? That could happen, right?
So we'll be looking at that regarding middle school choice in the next presentation. With the Sono school in the future, we'll see a shift in bus usage. So we'll be able to repurpose those vehicles over time. It'll all depend on what family's choice is, right? What they decide to do. So it's always a work in progress when it comes to transportation. Usually it's, we can plan the best we can, but there's always going to be some kind of change. So we have to be fiscally responsible as well as making sure the kids get to school on time and safely.
But what about side by side, given they're not technically one of our schools? Do they fund any of it, or we just kind of, because they're another school in the district, do we just kind of provide that, or do they?
Based on state mandate, we're required to provide the transportation for side by side. How we do that is up to us. It's a partnership between us and the school. So just as we are mandated to provide transportation for our VOTEC, our VOAD programs by state mandate.
It's good to know.
Anything else right now? Okay,
And one of the things I think, and don't move yet.
okay.
One of the things I think that we need to take into account, we're moving about 650 kids into South Norwalk. And most of those kids are expected to be in walking distance to the school. So it will reduce the number of bus usage. Our hope is that if it happens as planned, because, again, choice is depending on what families decide to do, then those other buses can be utilized to further support the magnet programs across the district. But that's looking at the most optimistic view if things work as planned and parents choose.
Right, because we're currently providing magnet at the elementary and at the high school level. So we're already a work in progress. We'll just be going forward for middle school choice.
Hopefully for now you can sit.
He has a really great presentation.
No pressure. So I think one of the first questions is why pathways? And as we're going through this, we're really looking at program choice and program diversity and really giving a higher student engagement for our students as they're looking to go through the Norwalk K12 continuum. And we want to start in elementary by providing them with some of these experiences and then allowing them to choose a more in-depth in middle school. And we started this process by actually looking at our high schools who have so many amazing programs already in place, such as our IB program, our digital media program. These programs, marine science, really is where we're starting because that's our end point. And so if we can build experiences throughout, then more students are going to be interested and maybe go into that pathway and really in middle school try different things, because just because you may choose to go to one middle school and try the marine science pathway doesn't mean that that's what you would want to then move on to high school. If it could be that pathway, but they may want to try digital media. So that's really where we started, is to provide these, looking at what we have and providing these K12 pathways. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight looking at each of our elementary schools, each of our middle schools, each of our high schools, and then what types of programs that we have or that we're looking to bring in, because some of them are in progress. We are still working to bring in these programs for unique opportunities for our students. And then I'm going to have a flow map that will show it may be digital media, it might be these elementary schools, then I would go to this middle school if that's where I wanted to continue to pursue, and then which high school. So there's flow maps that will highlight that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Interject. And I think one of the important factors in this is that we don't want students by the time they get to high school to have to make a determination without having prior experiences within those pathways, and then have to make a drastic change in the middle of their high school coursework. If they do, that's obviously their choice, but we want them to have exposure before they make a decision to move full-fledged into a pathway, particularly international baccalaureate, marine science. We also have health professions and digital media, all of these different avenues. We want our students either have a diverse exposure to the different programs within elementary and middle school before they go to high school, or if they have a vested interest in a particular pathway, then they're very decisive in how they want to move forward, that they can take that avenue, but have that experience throughout their learning experience as well, and not just have to wait till high school to figure that out.
And the other piece I just added in is that we do have specialized learning pathways as well for students that have more challenges and different approaches. So that's where I built that in as well, because I think that to see that continuum of support that we have built in Norwalk Public Schools is really important. So at Brookside, we have the Montessori program, which you've already heard about, but we've also expanded this year with a dual language program. We assessed that there was a need and we've built that into the program, and that is going to be expanding as we go. So that's a newer program at Brookside this year. At Cranberry, they're really looking in development, an environmental science approach, looking at ecology and conservation and nature. And so that is something that they are currently working on. At Fox Run, it's been a NEST program, and now it's gonna be a whole school approach going through the Pine program. And that the big difference is NEST is just working with specific classrooms, whereas Pine is working with the entire school community. So it's really going to be a school, a whole school culture, and we're excited to see that work roll out next year. Yes.
Is there more to that the Pine doesn't tell me what the theme is?
So it's, it's one of our neurodiversity programs that we've had in the district. It's the NEST program, which is a classroom that has a gen ed teacher, a special education teacher working collaboratively to provide supports to the class. And Fox Run has been building that program over the last few years. And so they've started, and right now they will have 4 classrooms. But now, looking at the rollout of this support, it's going to be more of taking those methodologies that they are using in those specific classrooms and using them whole school to support all students.
And what Pine stands for, I don't know if maybe that's what you're asking, is called Program for Inclusion and Rural Diversity Education.
So it's more of an approach of teaching strategies rather than a theme as we do with marine sciences.
Correct. So
And sorry, I see Erica's hand. I just wanted to make sure. Erica, do you have a question?
At Brookside, is the dual language program more similar to Silvermine or Jefferson?
I think that every school has a unique approach depending on personnel and how they're thinking about the structure. Some programs have either side-by-side, some of them have one-way, two-way bilingual programs. At Brookside, they have a one-way dual language program.
And Dr. Saya, I know you've educated me on the differences in the past, but maybe for the public benefit, can you walk through the different types of dual language programs and how a side-by-side differs from Silvermine's model as an example?
So in a side-by-side model, you have a monolingual and a bilingual teacher working in tandem. They have 2 classes, and those classes rotate either between a Spanish and English day. They might have a roller coaster model, which some people refer to, where half of the day is in English, half of the day is in Spanish, and they flip-flop the classes accordingly. In a 2-way bilingual program, you have 50% of the student population that are English speaking, 50% of the population speaking a language other than English. It could be Spanish, it could be Haitian Creole, it could be French, whatever language need exists in the community or whatever language of choice is decided upon. A one-way dual language program is a program where you might have most of the students speaking English as a second language. And in that situation, kids still receive either a side-by-side model where one day it's English, one day it's Spanish by 2 teachers. They might have one teacher providing both languages and having it shared either half of the day in Spanish, half of the day in English, and vice versa, or whatever other language the program has designated. But there are many different ways in which you can look at and structure dual language programs. That's some of the ways in which you can structure the elementary schools. In middle school, it becomes more complex because not only do you need people certified in be bilingual certified, but they also have to be content certified. So in many of those cases, you have to be very creative based on the personnel that you are able to identify, where in some cases you might have one content in English, the other in Spanish, and you rotate them as long as 50% of the time is shared in one language and the other 50% is shared in the other language.
Thank you.
So as we look to Jefferson Marine Science, we have the dual language program that started this year and the marine science program as well. So those are our two opportunities at Jefferson. When we look at College and Career Academy, they do have a college and career theme, and they're looking to even build in capstone projects for their students, which is really exciting because that will mirror our capstone in our high school. And then they also have a STEM focus through project-based learning. When we go to Marvin, they are looking to implement a digital media and communication opportunities for their students, which would then also connect with Norwalk High School's digital media pathway. At Merrimack, I just want to say they do have the transition literacy program there, but they are also looking to become an IB program. So that is that they're working on that now. They have already submitted interest, and they're working on their application. At Rowayton, they have STARS specialized learning classrooms, and then they are also looking to bring in digital media and communication. At Silvermine, we have our dual language magnet school, our program. And then at Tracy, they have character education, they have a success class, and then they're looking to bring in environmental science because some of the work that they have been doing has really been tied with working in the community and working in different areas. So really bringing in the sciences is, as you can see, is one of our big focus areas. So, and then Wolfpit, they are our arts elementary school, and they have digital media arts, and then they also have arts integration as well into their core. And then they also have a LEAP and a LEAP Junior specialized learning class at that school. So that leads us now into middle school. And so at middle school, we have our Ponus Ridge STEAM Academy, and they also have they're also going to become a Pine School as well. So you can see that flow from Fox Run into Ponus and supporting our students. And they also have a STARS class as well. So their big focus is around STEAM, but then they also have our Pine classrooms there as well. So that'll be a whole school approach. Now, when we go to West Rocks, they have a dual language pathway at West Rocks. So our Silvermine students and Jefferson students could eventually go into the dual language pathway at West Rocks, but they also are looking for the marine science, and they've partnered with our Maritime Aquarium. They also have a visual and performing arts pathway. So they have 3 very specific pathways for their different houses and different programs that our students will then be able to connect with. And you can start to see some of those connections to our elementary schools that are looking to do environmental or marine science, because that would be a natural flow for some of those students. They also have a transition literacy program that Merrimack has in elementary school. It then flows into West Rocks. At Rowayton, they have our global studies pathway, which will then lead into our CGS program. So the students who are interested in learning Japanese or Chinese, that is a great connection to then the CGS program. They also have a success program, and they are also looking to become an IB school as well. So that we have Merrimack, who's looking at it from an elementary standpoint. Rowayton is one of our middle schools that is also looking to become an IB school, and we have another middle school as well. They are also looking to bring in digital media and communications as well, because that is one of our high school pathways.
Here, I'm just going to push again to
Sure.
Unless Erica.
Yep, no problem.
The literacy program at Merrimack, is there a reason why it feeds into West Rocks versus Nathan Hale, where the rest of the cohort would go?
I think from the building of that program, there was an opportunity there when it was built. And so it was built out of, I think, experiences and supports, but it was not built into Nathan Hale, it was built into West Rocks. And so you'll see that in some of our specialized programs, that it isn't naturally a flow like that. I think it was built as opportunities arose.
Okay, thank you.
So with this, because it's a magnet concept, so students from Merrimack don't necessarily feed into Nathan Hale, and that was the old rule, right? So parents have a choice, so if you go to Merrimack, you don't necessarily go to Nathan Hale, right?
So that is what we are proposing,
Right.
that at the middle school level, students would have middle school choice. So regardless of where they live in our district, based on their interests, they will be able
To
to
go
go to whatever
Exactly.
program across the district at large.
Because that used to be when Merrimack fed into.
Correct. And the challenge with that is that if there is a particular, let's say somebody wants to go to Rowton because they want to be part of the Global Studies pathway, because they have interest in CGS, then they either have to find their own means of getting there rather than really being part of the process of being able to have access to that program without limitations.
Now, can I ask you one more question? There was something there that STARS, what does that stand for? Is that
So-
an acronym or something?
It is. It's our successful transitions achieved through responsive support. And this was a program that at one point was called the Special Class. And through conversations with our specialized learning team, we really didn't like that name. And so we really wanted to make it more about, achieving success and support, and really around supporting our students. No problem. Then at Nathan Hale, we have our arts integration pathway, which can connect, you can see some connections to our Wolfpit school. And then they also have a STARS class there. And they are also looking to become an IB school. So I just wanted to highlight that we have one elementary right now and 2 middle schools that are looking to build on our IB programs that is currently at one of our high schools, but you will see that our other comprehensive high school, Norwalk High, is also looking to bring in IB into their school as well. So that's part of this big rollout of IB and one of our pathways. I want to just make sure we have CMS, and CMS is a Bank Street school. They have progressive arts, and they also really are focusing on some STEAM and project-based learning at their school. So and that's, that school was built on the Bank Street model. So I'm going to transition to our high schools, and this is really where we started, was looking at, so we have a really strong arts program and
Before we get to the high schools, I know Joanna's going to come back and talk about some of the transportation implications for middle school choice. But I wonder if we can also spend a minute talking about some of what I would assume would be additional resources we would need to help guide students and families, through that. I love the idea that they can navigate through different pathways, and if you do marine science here, you can change to digital communication there. But it seems to me that they would need added resources to kind of help navigate that.
So if you're linking all of our presentations tonight, we started with Brenda from the Family Center, and I think that part of it is at our school, but part of it is really our communication plan and our support plan, using our Family Center and having these opportunities, like we are having choice fairs and opportunities for families to come. And we know that that's a great community outreach, but it also needs to be part of our guidance, our school counseling team, and really supporting our students and families in knowing what opportunities we have across the district. Because I think that is really going to be an important part of this rollout, or this type of strategic plan. Is it can't just be we're going to do this, but how are we going to communicate this, and how are we going to support our families in making those decisions? Because there is going to be more choice, and there will be opportunities for students to go and try these new experiences. And so just really having those conversations of what that would look like.
Perfect, great.
Could we go back to IB a little bit? I'm familiar with, one of my daughters went to an IB high school in Florida, and I'm so familiar with it on a high school level, but how, what is required of our schools in elementary and middle school to meet the international requirements to be part of that system, that baccalaureate system?
So there's the primary years program and then the middle years program, and one of the pieces is that our high schools, our high school, Brian McMahon, has just moved forward with extending to a middle years program because it's a 5-year program, and like years 1, 2, and 3 are in the middle school. So, and then years 4 and 5 are in the high school. And they are currently in the process right now of completing those applications. And there will be training that has to occur to our teachers. And so
Similar to advanced placement classes, the teachers have to be trained.
similar, and it has, and so, but they also have to connect mission and vision to that of an IB, to their expectations. So there is school work that will need to occur as well. So there's the mission vision work of the school, and then tie that into our teachers' professional learning, because if we can complete our applications, we will have opportunities throughout next year to provide those trainings throughout next year to start the following year. So that is really.
Have we budgeted for that expansion of the IB program?
So go ahead.
So one of the things that we have incorporated as part of the magnet funding is an application process. Schools that are going through this work will be submitting an application requesting the funding to fulfill the costs associated with being an IB school or organization. And that will be similar to what already Brian McMahon has been doing around their IB pathway at the high school. They apply through the magnet dollars request for that, but they have to complete an application to talk about the program, how they want to utilize the funds, and what are going to be the metrics of success that they're going to be measuring as a result of these additional resources being put in place. One thing I don't know, I don't think Rob mentioned is that this year, the principals that were interested in potentially expanding either the early years, middle, or the middle years for IB, participated in their international professional development cycle so that they could understand what it meant to become an IB organization. We actually had a number of elementary school principals participate because we wanted to make sure that if they made a choice to join, that they had true commitment to the work. And from that process, we had Narrowneck as a school that decided that they were well aligned to the work that they were already building, and this would be an enhancement for their current program.
So this is really a lifting up of standards. So we are, it's truly an international standard, an international baccalaureate.
Correct.
What students could be doing in other parts of the world.
Correct.
And then I just wanted to add that we did put in a request for capital for IB materials. So that was another level of planning for this opportunity. All right, so now we'll go to our high schools, and we've talked about our arts opportunities at Norwalk High. So now you should be starting to see the connections between Wolfpit and Nathan Hale and West Rocks, and now we're hitting Norwalk High. And then we have their digital media and communications, and you can see our elementary schools that are really taking on digital media going into our middle school, Roten. Here's an opportunity now that can lead into that pathway. They have the project Lead the Way Science, and we've talked a lot about science and STEM and STEAM, and there are, one of the things I'll talk about is that there are some focuses, but all of our schools are incorporating STEAM into everything that we do. And as I said, Norwalk High is also looking to bring in an IB pathway as well. So now we would have one elementary, 2 middle, and 2 high schools. Well, 3, because CGS also has IB courses.
What's the PLTW acronym?
Project Lead the Way. And there are different courses that are offered in different pathways at both of our high schools.
I'm asking, some of them I know, some I don't know, but people who are listening might not know. Education has all these wonderful acronyms.
A lot of acronyms, absolutely. So then, when we get to Brian McMahon, we've talked, they actually have 2 IB pathways, the diploma program and the career path program. They also have the medical health academy. They have Project Lead the Way engineering. They have success classrooms there, but then as they have some other opportunities that they're starting to explore, because this is all about, you know, continually looking to offer our students more opportunities. So I talked a little bit how they're expanding their middle years program to 9th and 10th grade, because currently it's only for 11th and 12th graders. And then they're looking for a computer science pathway, and they're also exploring a legal pathway. So just to provide more opportunities if that is something that interests our students. And then as things of that nature may come to fruition, then we also looked at providing these opportunities in our middle schools as well. Center for Global Studies, they have the Global Studies program, they have IB as well, and the IB middle years that is in development for 9th and 10th graders.
Enrollment right now for CGS, do you know, just out of curiosity, 200?
I think it's around 300. I don't have the exact.
It's a little bit less. It's in the
high twos.
You all happen to know which municipality, city or town, sends the most kids? Yes. Just, I'm not trying to stump you, I'm just curious.
Bridgeport is one of
and maybe you just
the
don't know.
places that we have a significant number of students. We can hold the demographics.
I'm just curious, so whenever you're curious to know.
We presented at the business meeting.
Yeah.
And then our P-Tech Norwalk program, which is college to career, STEM focus, and then they are building out more engineering opportunity for our students.
And one of the things that the team has been in conversation, particularly with Norwalk Hospital and other workforce development partners, is one, potentially create a certification pathway in nursing. And 2, because we constantly talk about teacher shortages, really thinking about the development of an education pathway, particularly through a P-Tech lens, is something that we're also further exploring with NCC and other local partners as well.
So I just tried to put it together in a flow chart. They are color coded so that elementary's in orange, middle school's in blue, high school's in green. We have 1 K to 8 schools, so it just changed the color. And then we have our 18 to 22 program. And so this is just a quick dual language pathway. We currently have Silvermine, Jefferson, Brookside, West Rocks, and then we've been doing a lot of work in our high schools around supporting our multilingual learners. And so that is part of the work that is in development for our high schools. Arts integration, we have Wolfpit, Nathan Hale, West Rocks going to Norwalk High, and then CMS is more of that K-8, so that would be another elementary school, but it fell into a middle school as well. Our marine science pathway and looking to add in that environmental piece, we currently have Jefferson, and then Tracy and Cranberry are in development, West Rocks, and then it would head to Brian McMahon High School. Digital media, and we have Marvin, Wolfpit, Rowayton working on developing digital media work, leading to Rowayton Middle School, and then to Norwalk High. So you can see some of these pathways, they do cross, but that's part of the choice program. And then when we're talking IB, you can see that we have Merrimack in development, and the asterisk just means that it's in development. It's not currently in place. Nathan, Hale, Rhoton, and then our 3 high schools that will then offer that opportunity. And these are really great opportunities for our Norwalk learners. And then STEAM pathway, we have Kendall College and Career going to PONUS, and then we have amazing opportunities at our high schools for STEAM. But I do want to just keep reiterating that this STEAM instruction is happening in all of our schools, and we're continually building those experiences for our students. Our global studies pathway is currently Rhoton and CGS, and that's something that we are going to look for opportunities in elementary school to support some of those experiences so that we can entice our elementary students who may not know that they're interested in Japanese or Chinese or different. So that's something that we are really looking to provide some opportunities in our elementary schools for. The Pine pathway, which I talked a little bit about, we currently have at Fox Run and PONUS, and then going into our high schools, providing those opportunities to our classrooms in the high school, because our students are going in through this program and then they get to high school, and we want to make sure that the same methodologies are occurring in the high school. The transition literacy pathway, we have Merrimack to West Rocks, and then at that point, when they're going into our high schools, there's a different support structure in place. The success pathway, we have a program at Tracy, at Rhoton, and then we have 2 programs at Brian McMahon. And then the STARS pathway, which, like I said, was previously called a special class. We have Rowayton has 2 classrooms. Nathan, Hale, and PONUS both have a class. Norwalk High and Brian McMahon both have a class. And then that leads into our 18 to 22 program, which is our Project Search and Norwalk Next Steps. So you can see a continuum of support going throughout. So this is what we've been discussing and looking and talking about middle school choice. And I think that leads us to a transition, but I'll take questions before, but it does lead now into the transportation of Joanna.
It's really excited to see, Rob. I really appreciate all these different pathways that we have in development. I love the flow charts. I'm just kind of curious, when we talk about some of these programs that are in development, I know some of the schools are submitting applications. What is the kind of very ballpark timeline? Are we thinking for the 23 school year?
So an example for the IB, yes, we're looking for the 23 school year because they're completing now. 22, 23 will be our training of our staff and preparing, as long as everything is accepted and we're moving forward, and for starting implementation in 23. So that is that's our biggest, because it has that international application and the layers to that piece. But as of right now, all of the schools that I've mentioned have all submitted their interest, and they're working on their application for April 1st, which is that next step. And then they've already been reached, they've had someone from IB reach out to them to open up the platform, and they're working on that layer.
And with other pathways, for the past year or so, they've been working to define what that is. So our goal is that by the start of next year, that all schools are ready to launch, at least the initial processes of offering coursework associated with the different themes. And even already right now, as they're planning the process, some of them are already offering some of the course opportunities this year in preparation for their full launch next year.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you for this presentation. It's very detailed, and visually it's very impressive. I also want the public to know that, it is COVID. We've been thrown back a few steps. However, the team, Dr. Estrella, everybody has been working very diligently and very hard. For this type of planning, it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of research, takes a lot of meetings and communication. And I'm looking forward, and this is great because it shows how hard Norwalk as a district is working, and it's going to be on a map because it's not every day that you see this. And this is a big change to what, people think Norwalk is, and the work that's being done, from top down. Thank you.
And I think to that point, Diana, a lot of rhetoric that we've heard around rigor, high expectations, or the lack thereof, because we're focusing on making sure that all children have access to our equity work, is far from true. If you can see in the pathway structure that we're trying to develop, we're really enhancing the rigor across the district in terms of the different programming choices that we have for our students, and most importantly, what they're being exposed to, particularly around project-based learning and inquiry, critical, and analytical thinking processes associated with some of these programs. Particularly if you look at the IB program, the level of the high-level thinking skills associated with a lot of their processes and curricula structure are quite rigorous, to the point that if you graduate with an IB diploma in some countries, some of those courses count as college courses. That's how rigorous the work is. So I'm really proud of the work that the team has done, really putting this together. And for our principals, for taking the initiative and thinking outside of the box around a lot of this work, because in a year, many of our elementary schools didn't think about themes and areas of focus and areas to concentrate. And within this past year, our principals have made us a commitment to really think through what their school is known for and good at, and using that to then elevate what they were doing to stand out from the rest of the group in their own unique way. So now we have the opportunity across the district to have a really robust portfolio of different program choices from the elementary school level all the way up to our high schools. And obviously we're going to continue to expand, but the team has made great progress in the midst of so much.
Also, to Sherry's point from past meetings, is this is being put together, but we also need the funding to be able to move all of these plans forward. So this is a great opportunity for the public to see what's being done, what the funding is needed for.
Once it's, running the whole program as we're going, how is it going to be rolled out to the public besides this, and, that they really understand the significance of the pathways, the significance of the IB program, et cetera?
Well, I think that we're going to have a strategic rollout plan when we're getting to that point. I think it's going to be a collaboration amongst our whole team, because I think that as we're thinking about this, there is going to be work that needs to be done in our schools, work that needs to be done with our families, and work that needs to be done with our community. And when I'm thinking about curriculum and instruction, I'm thinking about our operations, because as I transition to Joanna, there is going to be busing associated with certain aspects because it has to be available, but then also working with the communications team around how are we sharing this, and how are we educating the community on what are those opportunities, and what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Because I think that is an important piece, because you could hear an IB program, but there needs to be, those education sessions around what is that going to mean for my child versus not going to an IB program.
And I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead. I thought you were done. I think that's where the Family Center plays an instrumental role in this work. So One of the things that I actually had this conversation earlier today with the principals during the principals meeting is that through the Family Center, we will be providing ongoing workshops around the different pathways, around middle school choice, around the application process, and creating videos that families can tune in to have a sense of what offerings are available through the different fairs that the communications team is putting together. Families being able to walk around the different stations, and the principals alongside their members of their team being able to speak to the programs and the choices that are available to them is going to be critical. And that's where the Family Center becomes such an important hub, not only of communication, but information and opportunities to bring people together to like fully understand the complexity of all of this work, right? Because we want our families to effectively navigate it. Currently, or how it was, things were being controlled only at the school level, and the schools in isolation only have so much locus of control in terms of how they are able to disseminate information. And one of the other challenges that existed is that, let's say, Janine, your daughter wanted to go to CMS, then you had to submit an application at CMS, and you really didn't have a choice to really go into other programs, or you had to go to every single program and apply separately. And that made it very cumbersome and challenging for families. By having one process in which you do that, but also prior to immersing yourself in that process, having a number of fairs. One of the things we've also talked about is building a calendar of family tours to the different programs so that families can see firsthand the work in action is another element that through the Family Center we will be incorporating in the upcoming year as well. So there's so many different touch points of communication. They're all centered around the Family Center, and that hub being the key place where a lot of the resources will come from, but then expanded across the network meaning the district at large.
That sounds fantastic, coming out of the Family Center. I think it's another thing that shows the value of what we're trying to do here.
And it was one of the challenges previously, particularly in creating choice across the district, not having a center where families can go to and really have access to all of the resources in one location was a huge challenge, because everything was operating from one school to the other versus having a centralized system where families can have access to all of the resources in one location and like apply to 10 programs if they choose to in priority order, right? And that's part of what we're trying to do now with the Family Center, which was not possible without it before.
One thing I'm very struck with this, Rob, in this presentation and just what's been going on, I see in the last year and a half or so, is that you're lifting the pockets of excellence that people call the school and global studies, but lifting those pockets and sprinkling them all over in every corner in every school, and then pulling it all together. It's pretty impressive. The thought that you could have your child go and perhaps in elementary school they find out marine biology is their passion, and there's a way to really connect with the Maritime Center and then the high school, and science could be part of what you're studying. You know, it's just really very hopeful. And what I see and think of criticisms I've heard, that here we're working with all students. We're giving excitement to students that are having some difficulties learning. We're giving challenges to students that have an easier time absorbing material. So we're doing every part the educational system at the same time. And in an enthusiastic way, showed leading. So I commend you.
Team effort, everybody.
And I do see Erica's hand up as well. Erica?
Yes, I was just curious if there was plans to socialize this to local real estate agents as well.
I'm actually going to one of their panel discussions, so I will definitely be bringing this up. And one of the things, we will present additional information around this, because I want to invite one of Rob's team members is around the Gifted and Talented program and the work that we're doing in that arena, which is also another pathway. But I want to leave that piece for another day because I want to make sure that is able to see the continuum of work that we're trying to do, and also how we're trying to expand those opportunities beyond the programs we currently have as well. I think, Joanna, unless there are any further questions.
All sounds very, very good.
Okay, so I'm super excited to share with you about middle school choice. This presentation is a little bit longer. So over the past several months, we've been working with our transportation consultant, Transpar. Unfortunately, they could not be here tonight to present. There was an emergency situation, so I'll be presenting the findings. It's a lot of information in this presentation, so I'll go through it, and if you have any questions, I'll stop and you can ask. So when we're dealing with middle school transportation, it's that middle tier, right? It's sandwiched between the high school and the elementary school. And so it is the most efficient of all school groups, because in two metrics, when they're compared and they're standalone between the elementary and the middle school. So we do see in the middle school level the highest ridership. One of the reasons why we see the highest ridership there is because of the age group that we're servicing. These are students who are in that 10, 11-year-old to 12, 13-year-old age group, where they're just getting their independence. Mom can leave them at the bus stop, they can get to school, they can stay at an after-school program, or get back on the bus and go home. There's more independence there from the elementary, and it gives them the opportunity to have a higher ridership because parents are comfortable letting them ride the bus. So we do see that higher ridership than the elementary school, where you might see students who are going to a before and after school program, have other caregiving arrangements made, where parents have the flexibility to pick up and drop off for their elementary students. High school level, you see a lower ridership because kids are involved. They're doing before and after school programs as well. They're doing sports, they're going to practices, they're involved in clubs. So you don't see as many students riding the high school buses. So that middle tier is really important when you're doing transportation. They have the smallest ride time, right? They have the least time on the road. Their routes are shorter because we have to fit them within that time frame of being sandwiched between elementary and high school. They do have the fewest resources in that amount of time, so it does give us little room for any efficiencies with the existing system to accommodate choice riders at this time. So what the consultant looked at, because technically, Columbus is our magnet that pulls in from citywide, right? And so what they did was they did a comparison with the Columbus school and looked at what the percentage would be on parents who would be opting to go choice. There's currently, for Columbus, there's only about an average of 23 students riding. That's because we're pulling from all over town. So say, for example, Columbus has 12 bus routes. Those bus routes aren't completely full. There's not 55 to 60 kids riding on those buses because of the geographic areas that we're servicing. So we need more buses just for the area we're servicing, not for the number of students. Where you would see more in a neighborhood school that there would be up to 50 to 55 students riding. It also discusses the geographic constraints because we are providing from all over town. In preliminary estimates, we are looking at, if we do go choice in the first year, building in 6th grade, that we would need 4 additional buses. That would be a bus at each school. Currently, we have some buses within the fleet that will be able to be repurposed moving forward into the 23-24 school year, where it would allow us to be able to take 3 of those buses and strategically plan them, 1 at each building, where we would only need to add, only need the cost to add 1 bus additional in that first year as we start to implement the program. So they analyzed the forecast. They did give us the data for 5, 10, 15, and 20% opt-in. It'll all depend, as these programs are rolled out, how families choose. Of course, we're going to be communicating how wonderful the programs are, and we're going to be looking at who would like to participate. Maybe families will choose to stay in their home districted school, and maybe families would choose to go to a different program, or maybe that program that they're interested would be in their home districted school. So we would be providing transportation for the students in their home district school, as well as those students who decided to go choice. But we really won't have an idea of the percentage right now. Going forward, as you know, the momentum, as we gain momentum in these choice programs, we'll see what the percentage will be. So as the percentage increases, the number of buses would need to increase as well. So the cost would increase. They also point out that the industry is, going through drastic, challenging time right now with bus driver shortages, fuel increased costs, medical benefits for drivers. They also are dealing with cost on COVID after the fact, supplies, PPE. So we are seeing an increase in contract pricing. Now, Norwalk is in a 5-year contract with Durham School Services. So we are between 2020 and 2025. We do have the availability to go out 3 extension years where we will have those dollars already committed. And so we can forecast out for the choice programs as we need to add vehicles. They also bring up a good point where with choice programs, if we use the routes efficiently, which we do, there's also an availability to maybe do some policy changes as far as bus stops and where they're located. So if we run into an issue where maybe we're going into a tight budget year and maybe we're in year 3 of this choice program and we see where we need to add vehicles because we have a certain number of bus stops that are on that current route, and due to timing reasons, we might not be able to add more bus stops. We would need to go to like hub services or transfer services. I'm not a fan of that procedure, but it's something that we can look at going forward if we run into those issues. There's a lot of information on the next 2 slides. They've been able to take our current enrollment, provide us with the numbers for students who are ineligible or not transported based on the state guidelines, and students who are transported, how many current bus routes there are at each building, and the students per bus route. Then they give us the option for 5% opt-in, 10% opt-in, and then they also give us 15% and 20%. So ultimately, over time, as we build in the programs, we start in 6th grade, following year 7th grade, and then 8th grade, and then we'll be at a full-blown program. Over time, we might be looking at adding additional buses based on the, based on families who would choose these specific options. So the opt-in rate at 5% for the middle school enrollment for the first year, based on the cost of $87,000 a bus for the 23-24 school year, would be, with 4 buses being added, an approximate $348,000. Now, the fact that we have these 3 buses that we're going to be able to repurpose, the price tag will not be that high. We would be looking at 1 bus at $87,000. But the consultant wanted to give us those numbers just so that we understand that. It could be higher, but if we're efficient with what we currently have and we use our resources, we'll be able to make it work with just adding 1 additional bus in the first year. If we had a 20% interest opt-in, then we would be looking at 10 additional buses with a price tag of $870,000. Now,
But that's over the course of the whole program.
right, and I don't believe that we will have that issue as we are able to repurpose. Again, we have the Sono School being built. Buses will be repurposed from there based on how families choose to, where they choose to attend. And so over time, we'll see how much the impact, the financial impact will be. But if we use our current resources and move forward, we should be able to make the program work. And what's great about middle school choice is, we have, at the elementary level, we already have some choices. We already have some programs that students are able to apply to. And we have it at the high school level as well. So now we're just connecting the dots, right? We're being able to give those middle school families an option to choose and be able to provide transportation for them as well.
That's great. I think, when we look at the pathways that we went through, I mean, this makes sense, right? Like, and I think this is one of those things that will continue to distinguish Norwalk as a district, not just compared to our DRG groups, but just as a district in Connecticut. Just to clarify, so at CMS, the entire K-8 is citywide, or is it just citywide? Yeah.
No, it's citywide.
And for some of the magnet programs currently in elementary school, those are not all citywide. Some of those are a smaller catchment area, right?
Yes, Tracy currently is, because it just started about 2 years ago. Silver Mine, we've been pulling citywide for years. They were, Brookside and Silver Mine at one point in time historically were our bilingual schools. And over time, on to our ELL services were then dispersed throughout all the schools. And Silver Mine became the Mano a Mano program. And so over time, we've built this citywide catchment and been able to provide that transportation.
And then our high school lotteries are all citywide.
I believe.
And CGS has a separate program now that.
The pathways are not all completely citywide, although we have students that have made the choice of going into those programs, and we've been able to provide transportation. Our goal is to officially make all of our high school programs citywide.
I would imagine if funding became an issue, you just have stops that maybe just have less stops. I see you've got something in here about community stops. Instead of having buses go to every corner, you might have it where, it's just a community stop, and then the parents or someone would have to get the child to that point, put him or her on the bus.
Correct. So those are hub stops and
Right.
transfers.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not, it's an option
Right.
if we get to that point, but I would like to keep it, I'd like to keep the service the same across the board if we can. So at the elementary level, you'll find bus stops that are closer within the neighborhood, within a few blocks or so of each other. And then as you go on to the next level of schooling at the middle school, they're a little bit further out as the students become a little more independent. They are moved out onto secondary roads. And then as the students get to the high school level, and they're more responsible, stops are on the secondary and main roads. So it does change over time, and it does, we do have stops that are centrally located for the neighborhoods to utilize, and that we're picking up the maximum number of students at a stop, so that this way the routes are more time efficient and we're getting the kids safely to school and on time. So we'll see over these next few years how the programs grow. Transportation is always a work in progress as needed by the community. So as long as we are, the lotteries occur early on in the year, we have time to plan, be able to make them work.
Maybe would it ever be a situation where the child would have to get their own transportation too? I mean, that was something, if it ever became an issue with funding.
That's one of the challenges we have now,
We don't want
and
to
it
do that.
creates an equitable process for those parents that don't have transportation needs. So part of going through this process is really to ensure that all students have access to the programs across the district at large.
I mean, I think it's a great idea, and it's like, for so long the narrative has been about giving parents choice about how their kids learn and what school they go to. However, folks probably didn't anticipate the challenges that it presents as well, transportation. So looks like we're working all that out.
Transportation is a huge resource for people that prohibits them from.
So it's just another way of looking at that word equity, that we're actually providing transportation for everybody. You don't think of transportation there, but here it is.
And this
it's
is why it's
critical.
so important.
You can't get there unless you have transportation to get there, to be part of the program.
And I know, as you mentioned, this is not specific to Norwalk. This is, a challenge that districts across the country are navigating in different ways. I mean, I don't know if there's any foundations out there interested in specific looking at this. Like, have we looked at foundation dollars and, if somebody's like, this is a part of the equity puzzle that I'd like to try to help solve.
We can look into it. We focused on the data and analytics component in terms of philanthropy dollars, and we were fortunate enough to get $1.5 million around that. It doesn't hurt to put it out there. We wanted to first collect the data from the consultant to know what it would cost for us to do the work. I think for year one, because it's pretty cost neutral, I think we might just need to add one additional bus. And by then, if everything goes well with potentially moving forward with the South Norwalk incubator, there's gonna be some level setting as students start shifting to their community school. That might alleviate some of the low transportation load in other areas that would allow us to repurpose some buses. We won't know exactly what that looks like until we start engaging in that shifting process. But for year one of this process, I think we're covered with the resources that we have, particularly moving those buses from Jefferson into the middle school pool. The other thing that I want to point out that is critical in this piece, and it came out when we did the demographic study, is that by creating middle school choice, the overcrowding issues that we have in certain pockets in the district are alleviated, because it would allow us to diversify and disperse students across all the middle schools across the district more evenly. And not more, like we've had certain areas that are highly concentrated And as a result, there's not enough space in those middle schools. And when we looked at the demographic study, it showed that if we went to middle school choice, a lot of the overcrowding tensions would be alleviated through this process as well.
And historically, West Bronx was always a big population, right?
There's a lot of bottlenecking there.
Yeah, and Roten was always a little less. That's still the case, so that will definitely be done.
Yeah.
It's probably hard to forecast this, but I wonder if this might also have implications for some of the questions about, for want of a better term, racial balancing across the city, especially as we build a school in South Norwalk, right? As people have more choice, they're not, housing in Norwalk is super segregated, but, they're not tied to it in the.
So it allows for more racial balancing because your kids are being pulled from all over the district, not just one area. So it allows for diversity across the different schools with the magnet programs. My vision long term, not short term, but long term would be for us to be a district of choice from elementary all the way to high school, and really allow students across the district to be able to attend any program, even at the middle school, elementary school level, regardless of where they live. But that's not in the near future right now. We want to make sure we get the middle school choice process well, and then potentially engage the community in a bigger conversation about potentially programs.
The other benefit to this program is for families who socioeconomically have had issues over the years where, the state guidelines change from grade level, from elementary to middle to high school. And again, that's your middle school where the independence changes. And so a lot of the families, when they realize that they're not eligible for transportation, that becomes a financial burden on them. Many families work, they go to work before their kids go to school, or are working during, when they get out of school. So this gives families an opportunity where they can choose to go to a middle school where they'll receive transportation, and that helps them not only in the school, the students being able to choose what they want to do and what pathway they want to follow, but also it helps the family as a whole, able to give them the resource that they greatly need.
This sort of eliminates the out-of-district thing, right? At one time, there was an opportunity for people to go out of district for, as you mentioned, for maybe for childcare issues or transportation. So this pretty much, right? This, I would imagine, program will eliminate that.
It will alleviate some of that.
Yeah, right, right.
But it also opens an opportunity
Right.
that families don't have. Well, for kids, most importantly, they get to decide what pathway to potentially engage in, because the application process is not going to be just pigeonholed to the school itself, but actually the program. So you would apply to the school associated with the program. You could apply to the same school 3 times and apply to all 3 different programs. You have the ability to do that because you're not necessarily applying just to this, applying to a specific pathway within the school. And in some cases, you might have an interest in more than one. You will rank the different programs by preference order. And if you don't get into one program, you might get into the other, depending on seats. And that's where it becomes feasible to balance enrollment numbers across the middle school grades, particularly because you have X number of seats for every program across the district and across all of the different disciplines that we're looking at. And it would push us to, we could invest more in like building or renovating our buildings versus necessarily having to build extensions to our buildings, which is something that we've been looking at, particularly at West Rock because of the overcrowding in that building. That could potentially be reduced significantly. Any other questions?
I just think it all sounds great. I think, building is a good metaphor. I think, we're building a really, really exciting program here. We're continuing to build it. And I like the idea of thinking long-term, because this doesn't happen overnight. So I really appreciate the work that's going into it.
Thank you.
And that concludes our workshop.
Thank you to everyone. I think it doesn't conclude the meeting just yet.
Just the workshop.
Yes. We did add a couple action items to, business items to tonight's work session, just to, tonight's meeting rather, get these oil storage tank replacements moving. We have the approval of the revised cost estimate for the underground oil storage tank projects at Roten, Merrimack, Pitt, and Fox Run, and the approval of revised plans and specs for the underground oil storage tank projects at the same schools, which I would like to suggest we can move together. Okay. Is there such a motion? Edina, seconded by Mary Ellen. Are there any questions? And seconded by Sherelle and Erica too, thank you. Any questions or discussion about these? I think this is going to be over the summer. What is it? Yeah, this is, yeah. And these are all already capital, we have capital appropriations for them, I assume. They're just a little cheaper. A lot cheaper. So if there's no questions or discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of moving items 3A and 3B together, please say aye or raise your hand. And that's unanimous. And before we go into public comments, I don't know if we have any public comments tonight. Look like we do. Before we go into our final adjournment, I forgot to just mention our board members present tonight in person: Mary Ellen Ludwig, Sherry Brown, Diana Carpio, Dean Randolph, myself, and on line we have Sherelle Harris and a very special board member tonight. She turned her camera on, she knew what was going to happen. So I just want to, on behalf of everyone, wish Erica De Palma a very, very happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I saw Kara earlier. I don't know if anybody else wants to add, but feel free.
Well, I want to wish you a very happy birthday. We were hoping you were here so we could surprise you, but we're going to wait till the next meeting. Maybe have any more.
Thank you very much, guys. I can't deal with that kind of attention. Purposely not to.
Pisces' power is strong in this board. Okay, and I think that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. Again, just last call for public comments, nobody online, right?
No, just
okay.
Council Services attendant.
Excellent. Well, I will call for adjournment. All in favor? Okay.